Hello, you guys. I am Dustin, the blind Minnesotan. Today, I want to talk about what I learned in Fort Myers, Florida, when I was visiting my parents. Um, what I learned was if you're blind and visually impaired and you want to live in Fort Myers, Florida, you want to live near a mall called the Edison Mall. The Edison Mall is a shopping area located outside a downtown Fort Myers. So how Fort Myers is built is it goes Cape Coral, then there's a river, and then there's Fort Myers. So Fort Myers is not along the ocean. Fort Myers is along a river that separates it from Cape Coral. But Cape Coral is along the ocean. So and then that's to the west of Fort Myers. North of Fort Myers, you'll hit North Fort Myers, and then south of Fort Myers, you run into Naples. Um, so in the airport at Fort Myers is called um, the Southwest Florida International Airport because it's in Southwest Florida and it's an international airport. So, and then my parents live in like live on the newer side of Fort Myers, where the public transportation isn't the best. Well, so that's over by the airport in the east side of Fort Myers, because the east side of Fort Myers is inland. So if I was going to move to Fort Myers, I would need to move to West Fort Myers into the downtown area. Um, there is two major streets that go from, you know, the west side of Fort Myers to the east side of Fort Myers. One is called Daniels and one is called Colonial. Colonial is in the north part of the Fort Myers. Daniels is in the south part of the Fort Myers. So if you're blind and visually impaired, I'm going to tell you Daniels is more important because there's a city bus that goes from the airport down Daniels, goes to the Edison Mall in West Fort Myers, where I advise you guys to move. And then the, after the bus goes to the Edison Mall, it continues to Fort Myers Beach because it goes through Naples a little bit and then goes into Fort Myers Beach, where it's an where there's a peninsula and there's water on both sides of the town, and a lot of people go there to hang out at all the luxury hotels and stay at the beach. So, so if you're so, and the reason why I'm telling you guys to live by the Edison Mall is because all the buses from North Fort Myers goes to the Edison Mall in Fort Myers. All the buses from Naples flows to the Edison Mall in Fort Myers. All the buses from Fort Myers Beach goes to the Edison Mall in Fort Myers. And all the buses in Naples goes to the Edison Mall in Fort Myers. So all the buses, city buses, flow to the Edison Mall in Fort Myers. So if you're blind and visually impaired and you live near the Edison Mall in Fort Myers, you can get to any of the surrounding cities and back easily. Um, and then and then the road that's north called Colonial that goes through Fort Myers, the north side. That bus only goes to a neighborhood called Lehigh Acres, and then it'll take you from Lehigh Acres to the Edison Mall, where you can try transfer on a different bus to go where you need to go. So if you live on Colonial and you walk to Colonial and then you take the bus to Edison Mall, it's still possible. Then you have to transfer from a different bus at Edison Mall to get to a different bus to go where you're going. And I advise you just to live near Edison Mall so then you don't need to do like 2 or 3 bus transfers to get where you need to go. Um, so that's why I advise you guys to live near Edison Mall because it's easier with the public transportation system and the Fort Myers area. Um, and there's like a lot of single family homes in that area. And the more closer you get to a river, an ocean, or a creek that connects to the river that connects to the ocean, or a pond that connects to the lake that connects to the ocean that through the river, you're gonna see lots of condos there because a lot of people want to have access to the water. So along waterways that people can use to get out to the ocean and that area, you're gonna see big fancy condos. And the further away from the water access you get, the buildings get smaller, 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 and eventually you're just around single family homes. Um, and most apartments in Fort Myers are along Colonial and Daniels. So, and then as a blind and visually impaired person, you want to live along Colonial or Daniels if you don't want to live next to the Edison Mall, because that's where the best public transportation is going to be on those 2 roads in Fort Myers, Florida. But I encourage you guys to prioritize Daniels over Colonial because at least with Daniels, you can get to the airport, you can get to Edison Mall, and then you can get to Fort Myers Beach. And so when like you're down there blind vision impaired and you don't have nothing to do that day, at least you can go hang out at the beach or the mall or hang out at all the restaurants outside the airport. You mean Daniels will give you more things to do because Colonial, the bus just goes through a bunch of single family homes. So, so Daniels is a better street in my opinion. And then they have their major grocery stores down there like Winn-Dixie's, Publix. They have Kroger. And then they have like a bunch of like Whole Foods, of course. They have all these down in that area. Whole Foods is my one of my favorite Amazon return spots. So if I buy something from Amazon that I don't like, I like to take the bus to or Uber it to Whole Foods where I can return it for free. So, and then Whole Foods will ship it back to the Amazon warehouse. So I like having a Whole Foods access nearby, so then I can do all my package returns there for Whole Foods, for Amazon for free. So, um, so Fort Myers had kind of everything I needed, and if I was going to move there, I would, of course, move towards the Edison Mall in downtown Fort Myers. Um, and then I went to Naples. That's south of Fort Myers. Naples has way more apartment options, condo options, single family home options than Fort Myers. But everything in Naples costs more money because, yes, there's more apartments in Naples and more condos in Naples and more townhomes in Naples and more single family homes in Naples, but they're fancy. They're massive and they're fancy. And that costs, more money. When things are fancy and cool, they normally cost more money. So, um, and John D, he leads the blind and visually impaired community in the in Naples. And he runs a nonprofit called Passport. And what Passport does, it only works in Naples. They'll pick up disabled people from their homes and they will drive them around places in Naples. And he says it costs you around $10 a ride. And that money that you're paying goes to the driver. And then the gas money and all that comes from donations. So he goes to big business people down in Naples, and he kind of asks for donations. Hey, can you please donate for this organization so blind, vision impaired people and other people with disabilities can get around? Because remember, Naples doesn't have a really good public transportation system. So John runs this nonprofit called Passport to help blind, vision impaired people and other disabled people who decide to get to Naples have access to public transportation. So his name is John D, and he runs the Florida's blind and visually impaired community on Facebook. And then he runs a bunch of other blind communities on Facebook. And then he's also part of the Blinds Lions Club. And because Naples does not have a big blind and visually impaired federation, John runs his own blind and visually impaired community. And so if like you move to Naples and you need help as a blind and vision impaired person, you want to get access with Passport because John leads that community in Naples, and it's a um, very strong knit community. In Fort Myers, the blind and visually impaired community is led by the Lighthouse of Southwest Florida, and their office is located in downtown Fort Myers. And their office is very small, and their office has very limited services because the Lighthouse of Southwest Florida in downtown Fort Myers also runs off donations. And because they run off donations, if they don't get enough money, they can't provide more services. And John in Naples is able to get more donations than the organization, the Southwest Lighthouse of Southwest Florida, can get. Because it's called Lighthouse of Southwest Florida. So the Lighthouse of Southwest Florida in Fort Myers can't get as much donations as John's organization can in Naples. So that's why John's organization in Naples, Florida, has more services. Remember, service is called Passport because his organization in Naples gets more donations than the nonprofit in Fort Myers. And then North Fort Myers also has their own blind and visually impaired um, community, and theirs is called Lighthouse of Southwest Florida of North Fort Myers. And they're a different organization, nonprofit organization, that helps blind and visually impaired people. So, so Naples has their own organization, Fort Myers has their own organization, and North Fort Myers has their own organization, and they all run off donations. And Cape Coral has no organization to help the blind and visually impaired because no one in Cape Coral who's blind or visually impaired started one. So, so that's why I'm saying if you want to move to Southwest Florida, you want to move to Fort Myers, and you want to live near Edison Mall because then you can access the blind vision impaired community easily in Naples. You can easily access it in North Fort Myers, and you can easily access it in, if they do create one, the one in Cape Coral. So so then you have access to all those things. And I discovered that the seafood down in Florida is very delicious because it comes really, really fresh. Um, and then the more further away you get from like the waterways that lead out to the ocean, cheaper that Florida gets. If you're blind and visually impaired, and you're single, and you want to just live off Social Security, you can easily find a mobile home in the middle of nowhere that's and just use your Social Security and live in the middle of the swamps. You can easily do that in the more central parts of Florida. But the closer you get to society and the closer you get to town and the closer you get to the Edison Mall, the more expensive everything's going to get for you. The more expensive things are. But the closer you get to the Edison Mall in Fort Myers, the more access you have to public transportation. So pretend if like you move to the Edison Mall in Fort Myers in a condo right next to it, and you say, okay, this public transportation sucks. I need to go to an area of Fort Myers that doesn't have public transportation. My best advice is to you is to call Passport, John's organization in Naples, and say, hey, I'm blind slash visually impaired. I live in Fort Myers, the town above you guys. I can't get here. Can you have someone to come up? And then John, if he has extra drivers, might send someone up to Fort Myers to pick you up and drop you off. Um, it's I met up with John, and John is a very nice guy. And his group, Florida's Blind and Visually Impaired Community, is very helpful because he shares resources that can help blind and visually impaired people in Florida. And he told me that if you're blind vision impaired and you're coming to Florida, move to Fort Myers because if you're blind and visually impaired, Miami is going to be too expensive for you. If you're blind and visually impaired, Orlando is going to be too expensive for you. If you're blind vision impaired, Jacksonville is going to be too expensive for you, and Tampa is going to be too expensive for you. The most affordable major city in in Florida right now for blind vision impaired people to live in is in Fort Myers. So if you're blind and vision impaired, and you want to move to someplace warm, choose someplace near the Edison Mall in downtown Fort Myers. I stayed in Fort Myers about a month. I stayed there about a month, and I really enjoyed it um, because it got me to see a different side of the blind and vision impaired community. Because I live in Minnesota, and Minnesota, we see one kind of blind and vision impaired community. And when you go to Fort Myers, Florida, you see a different blind and vision impaired community. And each one functions, runs, and has different resources
than the other. And the good thing is, if you're blind, visually impaired, and you're looking for a job, you know, you at least can reach out to someone like John who runs Passport in Naples and say, "Hey, John, do you know any business person who's willing to offer me a job?" And then John can maybe reach out to his contacts and try to find someone. You know, you mean? Because John has all these connections with the donors he has. Um, and then John lives in Naples, Florida, you know, so he can probably say, "Hey, if you want to work with one of my friends in Naples, Florida, he be able to tell you where you can live that's more affordable in Naples, Florida, that's going to be close to your job." And then that'd be funny is his service might be able to drive you to your job. So you mean so that's why I'm telling you, reach out to John D on, the Facebook. He runs Minnesota's blind and visually impaired community. He runs Florida's blind and visually impaired community. Florida's blind and visually impaired community. And he runs that group. Um, I run Minnesota's blind and visually impaired community, so that's why I always get confused. Um, so it's good for you guys to go check that out. And when you guys are down there, call Passport and ask to speak with John. And then John will meet you. You can Uber someplace or take the bus someplace. John can Uber or take the bus someplace, meet you guys up, and then he can probably tell you guys things about Florida that I can't tell you guys about because I don't live there permanently. And then John, he right now is trying to work on a nonprofit that designed accessible housing for blind and visually impaired people in Florida. So after his house was hit by the hurricane, he is now using his house as a model to see, okay, if we build houses like accessible houses like this in Southwest Florida, would they last? So John is very involved in the blind and visually impaired community in Florida, that part of Florida. Um, so you want to talk to him, reach out to him, and if you have extra money, donate to his nonprofit Passport. Um, and then even donate money to Lighthouse of Southwest Florida, Fort Myers, and Lighthouse of Southwest Florida of North Fort Myers, because those two organizations need your donations. Um, and then I was down there for about a month because I was down there while I was looking for apartments on apartments.com. I found an apartment in Columbia Heights, Minnesota. And then my mom and my dad flew up here with me, helped me do the paperwork for my apartment. They did the inspection because I'm visually impaired. So if I did it by myself, I might not see things or notice things until it's too late. So I brought my two-sighted parents to come, fully sighted parents, and to see everything with me before I signed the papers. I signed the papers, and then they flew back down to Fort Myers, Florida. So I'm here getting my life together back in my new place in Columbia Heights, Minnesota. Um, I chose Columbia Heights because it's cheaper to live here in Minnesota, and the public transportation here is better than would been for me in Fort Myers, Florida. So I am staying a Minnesota resident. Um, so when you guys go down there, when you guys are looking at apartments and stuff down in Southwest Florida, you want to bring a retailer or a realtor. You want to bring a realtor with you because a realtor, as you going on apartment tours, they can see things that you can't see. And then if you bring them with you to your apartment signing, they can negotiate things for you and help you get a better contract. So, yeah, so this is what I kind of learned in my vacation trip to Southwest Florida / Fort Myers. I hope you guys have a good day. Bye bye.